Hello, it's Neil Romanek from the Flint, and welcome to the Flint Podcast. Today, I am talking to Doug Crisman, who is an investor, a businessman, and is going to talk to us about an amazing project in Africa called AFRISOS. That is the African School of Storytelling. I think it's going to be a really great conversation. Doug, hello.
Hello, nice to be with you here.
So, yes, great to talk to you. So yeah, let's talk about. I mean, when we had said when we spoke earlier, you called yourself a capitalist, and I think there's an interesting conversation we're going to have about business and investing and kind of how businesses kind of can do good in the world and how as investors especially can start thinking about investing in things that kind of help us along rather than hurting us. Can you maybe just talk about your background and kind of how you got started and how you got started in business? And then I know there's a whole path of starting to advise businesses as well and mentor businesses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't actually identify myself so much as a capitalist as really someone whose mission in life is to help others achieve their visions.
Hmm.
Now, capitalism is one way to do that for sure, in terms of helping them, but achieve what they want to achieve. In some cases, that's businesses. In other cases, that's charity organizations, not-for-profit organizations. But ultimately, my involvement is always working with individuals to help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So I'm doing that over in Africa right now. I did that for years in the United States and then theoretically retired. But I think I just quit being paid for working. I didn't actually stop working. So I'm basically doing all of my work pro bono over there. And I came across a very interesting organization called AFRISOS that you mentioned, African School of Storytelling, that was started by a young man who was 24 years old at the time, a filmmaker, a very charismatic young man that's been basically around all around the world shooting documentary films where he's basically presenting a cultural and natural relationships and the way that people interact with nature and kind of highlighting the importance of nature as being part of our being of who we are and the importance of that. And he's Tanzanian. And started this group of volunteers to basically help individuals within Africa, Africans, tell their own story. So instead of having somebody come in from the West or wherever to tell the stories of Africans, he started mentoring other young aspiring filmmakers to enable them to tell their own stories and in particular tell the stories of the local communities and what they're experiencing from their point of view so that you really get the richness of the culture and the beauty and the value that Africa actually brings to the world.
And you had been to Africa before several times
Yeah,
before.
I've been going over to Tanzania and specifically to on safari for several different years, and I'd really fallen in love with the country. And then I had an opportunity to work with Jigar Ganatra, who's the founder of AFRISOS, and be an advisor to him. So I went over in 2023. And since then, I've been working full time, helping them and now some other communities, excuse me, fulfill their dreams of what they're trying to accomplish in this emerging country that is still, still a very uh, developing nation. They've got their independence in 1961. Since that time, they're still evolving. And they're making a lot of progress. But there's a lot of cultural shifts going on. There's over 150 different tribes in Tanzania. So they've been bringing those together. There's the balance between the population and the robust wildlife and habitat that exists over there, trying to conserve and protect the habitat and the wildlife, but at the same time, not have too negative of effect on the people that have basically been nomads on those lands for thousands of years. And so AFRISOS has been involved with some of these communities. The Hadza is one example, which are the last hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. There's 1,300 of them left. About 300 of those people in that community actually live off the land. They hunt with bows and arrows. They dig roots. They provide food each day. They bring it back and share it with their community. They live in huts or on the ground. There's no electricity. There's no modern kind of environment around them at all. So they're just living out there on the land, and they're constantly, the land is getting condensed and pushed, making it smaller and smaller, not unlike what we've experienced in the United States in the 1800s with the the Native Americans. So AFRISOS is on a project working with them to teach them, actually, the Hadza themselves, how to use more modern technology to tell their stories, because they're great storytellers. They've passed their stories down for 10,000 years verbally. And so, and they've got a wonderful culture, and we're trying to get people to understand that culture so we can assimilate some of that into our modern culture, as opposed to eradicating it and just forcing the existing culture that we know onto them. Actually understand them well enough to see that there's some things we ought to learn from them as well.
Well, so you're saying like they're natural, the storytellers and telling stories for, as human beings, we tell stories, and of course they've been telling their own stories. And so how is that? I mean, it has to be kind of a transition for them too, because they, I would think, have been used to telling their stories, and then you're presenting them with, I guess, the opportunity to put things on camera, to record things in new ways. And so it seems like it might be not just a learning curve, but a whole new leap or opportunity, maybe, to like tell their story in ways they haven't at all thought of before.
Right. And it's been a project that hasn't started overnight. We've been working with them for about 2.5 years, close to 3 years. And it was a process of getting to know them, showing them some of the technology, talking to them about the kind of stories they wanted to tell, letting them contribute to those stories, and then to see if they were at all interested in even doing this kind of an initiative.
Well, yes, I wondered about if there's not a lot of digital tech there already. Were they interested in the first place?
They were, but there's not a lot of digital technology there. What you will find is people have cell phones. Everybody has cell phones. And cell phone service is actually pretty good in Tanzania. Internet's another story. That's a little tough, and we're not even introducing the internet to that community. We really don't want to get to. We're trying not to impact the community in any way other than give them the value of understanding of how to use their phones, basically, and cameras to tell their stories. And then we have a group of people who are mentors and editors who, after they do their editing and create their story, and show it locally and show it the way it originally is, we try to then also expand that so it could be viewed by an international audience, so that their story can really be understood and their culture doesn't get lost.
So you're saying that international audience. So there was if I have this right, the Wild Screen Festival, which is a festival usually in the UK, big nature documentary and wildlife documentary festival, had was it 2 years ago, or that was in Tanzania? It was held
2 years ago. They've been going into Africa and having a separate festival, and last year in 2023 it was in Kenya. And AFRISOS went up there and worked with them, and we actually did a community mentorship up in Watamu, which is a fishing village, and allowed that community to tell their stories of what they're up to, and then get that shared at the festival, as well as on some other venues. And then this year, Wild Screen held their festival in Arusha, Tanzania, and AFRISOS was actually a co-sponsor of that. So we helped them put that together and highlight, again, African filmmakers, bringing an understanding. Again, what AFRISOS is trying to do is bring young African filmmakers up to speed in terms of expertise, experience, um, service levels, so that when somebody wants to come and do a movie in Tanzania or in another African country, they don't have to bring a crew from Europe or a crew from the United States. They actually can hire people locally who are capable and quite capable of presenting that and really telling the story through the lens of Africans, which does
Which
give it
is
a different point of view because as much as we want to understand their culture, we're not in their culture. And we're going to see it with Western eyes, and we really need to hear the stories the way that they nuance those stories and that the way they have meaning to them. So we can truly understand the beauty and the richness of the African culture.
And there's Nigeria has a booming media industry, obviously. South Africa, there's a lot of stuff, and but those are, I think people forget how huge Africa is
Yeah, oh,
sometimes.
Africa's a huge continent.
Yeah.
And Kenya's right above Tanzania. Tanzania is a pretty large country. It borders on the Indian Ocean, and Kenya's above it. Mozambique's below it. To the left is the Congo, Republic of Congo, but between them is Lake Tanganyika, which is the second deepest lake in the world. Beautiful, huge lake, crystal clear. And then to the north west is Rwanda. So we're focused on Eastern Africa primarily, although we do things in other countries within the continent. But AFRISOS is based in Arusha, in Tanzania. It's run by Tanzanians. I'm just an advisor to them, and I work as their vice chairman to help kind of coordinate activities here in the United States to help, because it's a non-for-profit, to help get donations. For example, one of the things that we're doing right now is building a media center out at the Hadza community. And we've raised the funds to build that, and then that will house their own equipment, cameras, and editing equipment. And we'll provide mentors out there we're still working on the timeline, but definitely for 5 years, maybe even as long as 10 years, that will provide them the support so that it isn't just something that gets lost and started and stopped. We'll just continue to mentor people that are interested in the community, help them tell their stories, and they can use that media center for multiple purposes, including screening their own films to their own community, that type of thing. So we've been very fortunate to have some really great people. David Groper's one that donated about 95% of the cost of building this facility. It's a small facility that looks very, Boma-like. We're trying to stay within the natural architecture. We used a local Tanzanian architect that's been working with the Hadza for many, many years, decades really. So we're trying to just, again, bring their culture, preserve it, not just film either, songs, photography, books, whatever tells a story. The AFRISOS is the African School of Storytelling, not the School of Filmmaking. We're primarily filmmakers, but by the same token, we've also got programs for photographers. And we just brought in a group that recorded a lot of the songs of the Hadza, basically sitting beside which they would do normally, sit beside a fire night and sing songs, tell their stories through songs.
And Jigar is there on, and also I want to sort of say that the reason we're not talking to Jigar, the founder, is because he is so busy doing so many things that we couldn't pin him down. Not that we wouldn't want to be talking to you, but just to sort of say that's why he's not on this call.
The focus here, not myself. Jigar is, when I say we, I'm not doing all of that. The team is doing all of that. We have 6 full-time staff, Tanzanians, that are working in Arusha on this project. And Jigar is the chairman of that group. He's the one that provides the vision. He oftentimes provides the contacts and the relationship building that enables us to get financing or donations.
Mm.
He also is an excellent and very successful filmmaker, young filmmaker. He's only 27 years old, but he's been filming since he was in his 20s, early 20s. And he's, in fact, just showed a film that's been shown, in fact, best short film at the Boston University Film Festival, Redstone Film Festival here a few months ago, on the Chameleon Corridors, which is a film on the Eastern Arc Mountains about the environmental issues and the local communities there that are saving the forests to save a really unique species of all types of reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and habitat that don't exist anywhere else in the world. So he highlighted that with a little 20-minute film. It's just absolutely beautiful. Hopefully it'll come out here. Schoolyard Films actually produced that, provided the executive producers. And in addition to that, he's out right now on a shoot with a group in Botswana. They're doing a series on communities there that are throughout Africa with some Western filmmakers. He's also has his own film, which he's doing with the Hadza, called The Children of Honey. Children of Honey is going to be a full feature documentary on the Hadza's culture and its interaction with the current culture, society, the Western culture, if you will, and not necessarily Western, but Tanzanian culture, and how that the struggles that are going on, for example, with the children going to school and getting people to understand that these children are raised, and Jigar is dedicating his life basically to these types of films. So he really wants them to have a voice in this so that we understand that it's a two-way street, that you really have to listen, because these kids are raised in the Hadza community by the community to be able to survive on the land. They aren't put in a desk or put in a room and said, stay there, study, do that. Their studies are understanding nature and understanding how to survive in a natural environment without anything.
And I'm sure they're probably sitting there going, why are you telling me this stuff?
So
how could this possibly be useful to me in my actual life?
Yeah. And so, but the communities, insightful enough to say, we should get our children to understand what's going on, and some of them have already been educated, gone to college, and have come back and helped the communities. Because the future still marches on. I mean, we're trying to preserve their culture, but the assimilation is probably inevitable. So the question is, can we ease that? Can we make that, help them make that transition without destroying their culture, losing their culture, or making it so difficult that they don't want to do it? But when their children go to school, that's, sit down, be quiet. If they're not, they kind of, give them stern discipline. They don't take baths like we do every day. Some people, in fact, in the Western world now don't think it's such a great idea to take a bath every day or a shower from a health perspective. But so they say, you don't smell good. You're bush people. You ought to be, just sent back. You got to adapt to the way we are. And our hope is that maybe the educational system and others can understand their story, and people can understand that there needs to be some give and take here in terms of helping them assimilate, and that everything in the way that we do it isn't necessarily the best way to do it. So that's Jigar's mission, and he's embedding himself with the Hadza for a year, and he's already been learning their language. He's already been with them quite a bit, but as he's doing this film with them, it's going to be their film. He's actually going to live amongst them and just do everything they do.
Well, that's I mean, when we had spoken before this call, we talked about that thing of what we have, what we have to learn from indigenous people, or however you want to phrase that, the kind of the people who were there before that.
They've been there.
Yeah, so they were there first. And that there's that, consistency of experience they have, and tradition, and practicality, and a whole set of things that that'll, maybe you could say, a lot of us have lost. And that, traditionally, certainly historically, the idea is that we come from the outside and you try to eliminate that, and we're going to start with a clean slate and get rid of all the messy people who were here first, and we'll have a clean slate, and then we'll do our thing. And so, trying to do that in a completely different way, and see what they, in a way, what they have to teach us, seems like a really different approach, and also maybe one that's really, really important right now.
Right. Yeah, and I think another thing that I didn't mention, which just in speaking about the Hadza, they understand nature. I mean, they understand it better than scientists understand it, because it's been handed down to them and they've lived it, and they're a part of nature. They're not there to, they know how to balance the use of nature, what to harvest in terms of whether it's animals or vegetables or whatever it is, roots. They know how to use every leaf or every little bit of nature, whether it's for medical purposes or whether it's for nutritional purposes, or just simply to make sure that the land is taken care of, because without the land, they don't exist. So it's an interesting that sometimes I think we perceive these native communities as being in some way less intelligent. But these are very smart people. They've survived and figured out how to make this stuff work. There's a funny story that one of the leaders of that tribe was invited to go to the Chicago Institute of what is it, of history, where they have a lot of skeletons of fossils of the dinosaurs and birds and whatever. So he had his spear and his normal attire. They let him on the plane. They brought him in, and so he was touring the museum, and one of his colleagues' story is that he pointed up to the skeleton, a fossil up in the hanging from the ceiling. He said, "Bird."
Mm-hmm.
No, it was a bird. It wasn't any question to him what it was, just seeing the skeleton of it. Just so it's they know bone structure. They've they live with this wildlife and this habitat on their own. And another organization I should make, that these people are struggling, and they're not economically. Everybody in Africa, and particularly these natives, are struggling because they're getting pushed off their land, and they're having to try to find a way to create economy. So one organization that we've been working with and partnering with is called Carbon Tanzania. They actually work with the Hadza and the land that they own, that they've been able to measure that and understand how much carbon it captures, be able to sell those carbon credits to organizations, and then that money flows down into the local community. And then they use that money to pay people to protect the land, to stop poaching, to be stewards of the land as well, and that creates an economic base for them. So
and has that been effective as well? Because I know that there's a lot of controversy now around different offsets, and how some work and some don't.
And it also gives them the ability then to represent themselves when you get into political issues and social issues, that they have the power and the ability from an economic perspective to not be so disabled that they can actually have their voices heard and represented in a positive way, which I think is helping them a lot. And they're using it to help their kids go through school, get into college, it's not used for for something like, let's put a TV in every hut. That's not what they're doing with it.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
has to do with just helping the community at large and giving people an economic opportunity so that they can, as time moves forward, they'll be able to um, be empowered.
Hmm. So are we, the countries like Africa, and obviously equatorial countries, but Africa especially is getting hit first by a lot of climate change impacts. So are we seeing that already affecting how they're living, or is there a sense of preparing for that? Because will change things, and that, if their way of life isn't impacted already, that will impact it further.
Mother Nature seems to have the upper hand on this one. So
Mm,
I don't know that there's a lot of things that they're at that level in these types of communities that they can do about it. Certainly, I'm sure the government is trying to do things to help in climate change. It depends on the community. The Hadza, or a lot of the Maasai, which is another a group over there. Neither one of these are the largest groups, by the way. There's 100, like I said, 150 tribes. But the droughts have had a big impact on the Maasai because their primary income has been raising cattle,
mm,
and they're being forced into agriculture. When the agricultural then means that you've got to take the lands, uh, cut down the trees. Others are cutting down trees and burning them for charcoal, for fuel, just to have an economic uh, to create an economy where they can survive,
mm,
because they're not living off the land anymore. So this is happening all across Tanzania, and it's happening in other African countries. I can't speak intelligently about all the countries in Africa, but I know Tanzania well enough to speak somewhat accurately about that. And well, I mentioned the Eastern Arc Mountains, all the logging that was done up there, and then the agriculture has created these big gaps in forest.
mm,
That
mm,
has
mm.
in fact changed the rain patterns and moved the
Sure.
rains now so that the rains uncontrollably certain times of the year now at the lower levels where it never used to.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
now they're replanting those forests, and that's also impacting the chameleons and other reptiles that are up there that are very unique, and you won't find them anywhere else. So they're trying to do that kind of repair. Another organization called PAMS is in there helping fund that reforestation. They pay the local communities to replant the trees. They provide the trees for them, and then they're teaching them how to harvest them down the road in a way that they can have an economic value for that without stripping the forests and without having to do necessarily agriculture where they have to tear down the forest to grow their crops. So those
Mm,
kinds of
mm,
programs are going on. But the Maasai, they're again moving to agriculture. That has impact on the lands between the national parks. So in Tanzania, they've taken the national parks and set those aside. But then there's these corridors between the national parks, which is where the communities are, and they're increasing the agriculture, and that is keeping the animals from being able to migrate. And if the animals
mm,
aren't
mm.
migrating down from Kenya and through the Serengeti and down through the different national parks, you're basically going to starve off you're going to kill the wildlife.
Mm, mm,
Elephants, zebras, wildebeest, all the others that follow with them, they constantly are migrating back and forth, following the water.
mm,
So that puts pressure on the locals because they don't want them killing the elephants when they come through and stomp on their crops. So the government's
mm,
working
mm,
with
mm.
them to help them solve those kinds of problems. Other NGOs are working with them to try to help them solve those problems. But the bottom line is it's a big impact, and it's something that has to be continued to be monitored and managed well between how these uh, um, people that have been on the lands, these 150 tribes and other Tanzanians that have been in the lands for many hundreds of years, of what do you do with them if you're forcing them off their land or not letting them, they can't
Mm,
stick with their
mm.
livelihood. And so the environment's involved in that. It's environmental, it's conservation, it's economic, it's political, it's educational. But the bottom line is all that's trying to come together and sort itself out to get a balance. Hopefully it'll be one that, and what we're trying to do, as well as many other not-for-profits over there, is to help mitigate the damage, mitigate the impact, negative impact on the communities, and try to help. There's very positive oriented people that are trying to, they know they want to conserve the animals, but they also don't want to put the disadvantage the Maasai tribes and others to the point where they really are just impoverished in big cities. And that is happening, and that needs to be, we need to continue to work on those kinds of things to try to reduce that impact as this whole thing evolves. So, one thing you say conservation is a good thing. We want to save animals. Well, it is a good thing, and it's important for human beings to be connected to nature. But at the same time, if you're taking human beings and putting them into a really impoverished area in a 2 million population city, that you can't have that either. So we got, the balance has to be there someplace, and those are the kinds of things they're wrestling with. But fortunately, Tanzania has been a fairly stable politically. I haven't had any big issues. There are tensions between, obviously, these tribes and some of these efforts to increase the tourism industry. The expansion of agriculture is putting different pressures on people. One thing I didn't mention is the hunting. They still allow hunting to happen there in controlled, they call them
hunting. You mean like
wild
safari
game,
hunting, or hunting by the?
They come in. They've done a lot with a lot of it's from the Arab world. Come in and bought, basically leased from the government, thousands of acres of land so that they can bring people in to do trophy hunting. And a lot of that is not done in a humane way. I know of one hunter that really does it, what he calls ethical hunting. It's too long of a story to get into here, but there are some people who are trying to be more careful and use it more as something that helps balance the population in areas where it's really not the rich wildlife areas anyway. But that's an ongoing contention. But I know the government needs the income, so that I'm sure that's part of the reason that they do it. But there's a lot of concern about that type of thing going on. Poaching was a really big issue, still continues to be an issue, but with the ban on ivory, that helped a lot with reducing on the elephants. But rhinos are almost non-existent. Pangolin, which is a kind of a reptile, kind of a beautiful little animal that's very rare, very rarely can you see them. Those are now being hunted and found and taken to the Asian market for what they believe are medicinal value, and that's really endangering those. So there's a lot of endangered species over there still, but a lot of effort has gone into anti-poaching, and it's getting better. It's not as bad as it used to be. So there's hope all the way around. We're just part of that little thing, and people like Jigar, some other filmmakers, they're trying to bring all of this to light. They're not an advocacy organization. They're not out carrying signs and protesting anything. They're simply creating content by the people for the people to present to others so they can understand what's the true African point of view on this. And then if there's other people who pick that up and however they work with it, that's up to them. But we just really want the stories to be told.
And that story as well is not just like this is what we were doing and where we came from, but what these issues that we're facing right now and how do we solve them, those stories that are really happening. So
we want them to be able to talk about what they're experiencing right now today and be able to present that themselves in the way that they would. I mean, I did not do it justice in the way that I presented it here. If you heard it from one of them, you would certainly get nuances to this that are much that give you a much clearer picture and a much more impactful picture than what I've been able to paint here today. But I've tried to at least give you from, I've spent the last, not the last, but over the last 12 months, I've spent 5 months living in Tanzania and working in these communities. And so I do have an empathy and a little bit of understanding.
Amazing.
And I'm
So
learning.
what are some of the other things you're doing as well? You've been working on a few other projects, I know.
Well, I've expanded my efforts over there to also include some other nonprofit organizations that do different things to help these communities establish sustainability and an economic, some form of economy so that they can just make money and sustain themselves without having to sell their land and eventually go into one of those big cities. So I'm working with that. That's a company, it's called Vision Growth Impact, VGI Ltd. And I have 4 Tanzanians over there running that organization. In the US, I'm working with helping find some funding for these organizations. I'm also working with a fellow in Boston, Supreme Hassan, who is the head of a restorative justice movement that is working to reduce violence in Boston, Massachusetts. I've worked with him for about 6 years when he was behind the wall in prison, and now that he's out. Amazing program. So I'm loving doing that. And then I'm doing a full feature film on a Tanzanian guide by the name of Brit called by the name of Paul Oliver, who was very instrumental over there, and I went on safaris with him. We're working on that project, so we got a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire, and so we just anybody that finds any kind of interest in any of these things that would like to get a hold of us and contribute in any way, even if it's just moral support. We're always welcoming others to join in our passion.
That's just what I was going to ask. It's like, how can people help?
Well, again, just contact us. You can reach me at Doug@vgi.com. Excuse me, .ltd. That's my email address. Our website for AFRISOS is afrisos.ngo. You can go and look into that and find ways that you could join us, or you can simply give me send me an email. Like I said, if you want to donate, we have a arrangement with Chapel in York, which is a big foundation in the US that collects our donations and then gets them over to Tanzania for us. And you just have to go onto their website at chapelinyork.com or .org, and they will there's a place to donate, and you can just select it, AFRISOS, African School of Storytelling, off a list, and give a donation of any size that you'd like. It's tax deductible in the United States. So, and I've talked to a number of people that I know, and they just say, I'd like to go over and participate with one of these communities and volunteer. If you want to do that, let us know.
Yeah, I'm sure they get probably as much or more out of it than the Tanzanians do.
It's a life-changing experience. I had no intentions when I went over there to ever really get this involved, but you kind of, it's hard to resist when you see these people who have nothing and are going through these challenges. And I only think back to what maybe could have gone differently with our Native Americans if we would have been able to have some people involved and helping mitigate some of that. It might be a different story here today, and that's kind of where they're at now. They're decades behind, but in a way, maybe they're ahead, because now there's more awareness and understanding of the value of these cultures and these people, and that maybe that we'll be able to have their ongoing story be a more positive one.
And maybe we can learn from their experience. That it may be an investment in our future by helping them out.
And I'll be happy if I can just learn Kiswahili. I've been trying to learn Swahili. Not a difficult language, but
are you on Duolingo, or how are you learning?
Duolingo. I also have a tutor, and then I try to use it when I'm over there. but yeah, it's better to be immersed in it, and then you can really start picking it up and using it. But if you're going to be there, get in. I learned this from our guide, from Paul Oliver. He said, you're not there to observe. If you're just there to observe, what's the point? Be there to learn, be there to grow personally. Don't just point and say that's a kudu or that's a lion or that's, it's like, what is a lion about? What is a kudu? I mean, what is this bird? What's its purpose? Why is it there? Understand it. Understand why the Rift Valley is the way that it is and how man evolved out of Africa. And don't just say, "Oh, that was a cool looking cheetah." It's like, well, what are they all about? I mean, people don't like hyenas, or and it's like they're great. They have a wonderful purpose over there. So it's that whole wonderment, adventure, and that's kind of what I'm all about, is trying to help people, and being with these younger people over there really reinforces that in me, that don't be afraid to get out and learn about new things, and don't just observe them, learn something about them, and have an adventure and have fun with it and get involved with it to some degree, so that it really enriches your life. And it's not just something you come back and say, I was over and I saw this and I saw that. It's like, no, I learned this. Yeah, I learned this and I learned that. And I'm a richer person for it. I hope that everybody that hears this podcast, that's the one message they leave with.
It's an amazing place to end it. Thank you so much, Doug. It was great to talk to you. And
Right.
And I hope people get involved in AFRISOS. We'll put all those links and stuff in the notes there. So thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.